Chapter 2037. Even I wasn't used to it when I first came here. Half of the guards that followed me on the mountain froze to death. His eyes were faint and his eyes were as calm as water, without any ripples at all. Luo Qingchen quickly put on the coat and seriously tied the belt. It had to be said, when she put on this furry black coat she instantly felt warm. She was suddenly a bit moved. Although Feng Qianchei's face was ice cold, he had already taken care of her after knowing her for less than 2 days. It seemed like the 5% affection was still a bit useful. The coat Feng Qianchei gave her was very big and it directly fell to her ankles. He saw that she couldn't tie the belt properly after a while, so he helplessly said, "Let me do it." Luo Qingchen nervously pursed her lips and said, "Thank you." He skillfully put the belt through the holes on both sides of the coat and tied a knot behind her back. Luo Qingchen could feel his slender fingers carefully circling around her back twice before raising his right hand and putting the hood on her head as he said, "Not bad. Is this master praising me for looking good?" She gave a soft laugh as a faint glow appeared in her clear eyes. She was a bit stunned and couldn't help falling into a daze. Ding, affection has increased by 5. Mission completion rate is now 10%. You really are bold. You're not calling me your highness and you're calling me master like Dong Liang? His deep eyes narrowed and there was a feeling in his heart that he didn't want to see Dong Liang recently. Luo Qingchen thought in her heart, it's already good that this treasure isn't calling you Feng Qianchei. But on the surface, she looked at him with a smile and said, "Aren't we outside? If our identities are exposed, it wouldn't be good if we were chased by our enemies. I'm doing this to protect this master's safety. If we meet our enemies, you'll run faster than anyone else." Feng Qianchei instantly replied to her. He narrowed his eyes and looked over her. He really didn't believe that there would be a person in this world that didn't care about their own safety. Whether it was his imperial father, the empress, or the personal bodyguards who followed him to Shuefeng Mountain, they were all loyal to him without thinking about him. Being born in the royal family, there were some things that he could see more clearly. Not to mention this person whom he had known for less than 2 days? If she ran away in a crisis, he wouldn't find it strange at all. How could that be? Luo Qingchen's eyebrows twitched slightly. If I were in danger, Dong Liang wouldn't have run away. That's because if I die in the Snow Peak Mountain, they will die as well. Feng Qianchei seriously looked at her face and said word by word, "This is the reason why they would sacrifice themselves to protect me." Hearing Feng Qianchei's words, her heart was unconsciously startled. This was a kind of loneliness, or perhaps a kind of loneliness. The words he expressed between the lines seemed to be telling of the indifference of this world, an indifference that had no sincerity. Maybe you shouldn't deny everyone. Luo Qingchen took a deep breath, looked at him and said, "There are many people in this world who give their hearts to others, whether it is family, friendship, or love." "I don't believe you." He hooked his lips into a smile, a faint coldness in his eyes. His thin lips softly said, "Because I even deny myself." In this world, he didn't love anyone because the person he loved the most was himself. He knew better than anyone that there was no one who could surpass himself in his heart. Whether it was his royal father who raised him, or his royal mother who died for him. Chapter 2038. Seeing Feng Qianchei like this, Luo Qingchen suddenly understood just how cold the feelings of the royal family were. The high and mighty monarch could kill his own child for his own benefit, and the so-called child could also kill his own royal father for the throne. This kind of feeling was truly too weak. Not even 2 hours after entering Snow Peak Mountain, the snow in the sky had already turned from drifting snowflakes to goose-feather-heavy snow. There was a thick layer of snow on the road, and half of the wheels were covered in snow, so the journey gradually slowed down. Luo Qingchen stuck her head out of the carriage, and the fine snowflakes fell on her face, chilling her to the bone. When she wanted to reach out to catch the snowflakes, She was pulled back by Feng Qianche sitting beside her. "What are you doing? If you want your head to become a target for assassins, you can stick your entire head out." He narrowed his eyes, and there was a flash of light in his eyes. "Assassins?" She blinked and said, "Aren't you going out in disguise? Will there be assassins?" Logically speaking, as the Eastern Palace's crown prince, Feng Qianche's itinerary should be kept a secret. "I will come to Snow Peak Mountain every year to pay respects to my imperial concubine mother. This trip will not take more than 3 days, so people with good intentions will definitely be able to calculate it." Feng Qianche calmly said, "If I am not on guard, I would be more willing to pay respects to my imperial concubine mother alone." Seeing Feng Qianche's faint appearance, Luo Qingchen suddenly felt that she could not understand this man in front of her. He was sometimes cold, sometimes cruel, sometimes overbearing, and sometimes gentle. But she knew that as the crown prince, no matter what he did, he had to be careful. One wrong step and he would not be able to ascend to the throne, but rather the underworld. "Your imperial concubine mother must be very good." Luo Qingchen changed the topic and said with a faint smile, "Just by looking at you, I can tell that she must be a peerless beauty. Didn't you just say that the most beautiful person in the world is Minister Rong's son, Rong Muling?" Feng Qianche narrowed his eyes and a trace of probing flashed in his eyes. "That was in the past. People, there are times when they don't understand." Luo Qingchen seriously looked at him and said, "You don't think it looks good now? Even if Rong Muling was the most handsome man in the world, he was still trash in her eyes. Only the original owner would think that he was good." It seems that Qing lady's eyes change very quickly. Feng Qianche curled her lips into a smile. "Then who do you think is the most beautiful person in this world right now?" Luo Qingchen clicked her tongue and suddenly recalled the 5 points of favorability she added at the beginning. His Highness the Crown Prince probably wanted others to praise him, but she suddenly wanted to be mischievous. "Of course it's me." She pursed her lips and chuckled. "Didn't Dong Liang compliment me just now? You really are." Hearing this, the corners of Feng Qianche's mouth curled into a helpless smile, very confident. "Ding, affection has increased by 5. Mission completion rate is now 15%. Hearing the notification from the system, Luo Qingchen lowered her head and hid the smile that she couldn't hide. Although the favorability increased very slowly in this world, she felt that it was very real. She felt that the female lead aura was not that important. She was slowly walking into this youth's heart step by step. Even if it was a bit difficult, it won because it was real. "Master, the horse carriage shouldn't be able to continue on the last part of the mountain road." Dong Liang softly tapped the sedan and said, "Should we do the same as before and settle the horses down first?" Chapter 2039. When her thin embroidered shoes stepped onto the snow, she felt her body tremble and the soles of her feet were instantly filled with a bone-chilling cold. "How far is it from here to where your mother is buried?" Luo Qingchen slightly knit her brows. Her feet would be crippled if she walked with these shoes. Feng Qianche's brows slightly moved and his eyes filled with pride as he looked at her and said, "When I told you to go to the town to buy things, why didn't you remember? You're still talking about me, you also don't remember." She felt a cold feeling slowly spread through her body, and even her warm hands gradually turned cold. "Of course I remember." He gave a soft snort and turned to Dong Liang behind him to say, "Give her the things I told you to buy." "All right, master." Dong Liang took a pair of moon-white boots from his horse's back and slowly walked over to Luo Qingchen as he said, "Miss Qingqing, this is what master told me to buy for you. It's the smallest size, see if it fit." Luo Qingchen was stunned and a faint liguang flashed in her clear eyes. There was an inexplicable feeling of being moved. "What are you in a daze for?" Feng Qianche saw that she was in a daze and his thin lips softly said, "You don't want it? It's not that." She did not say anything else and seriously put on the boots before saying, Thank you, it's just right. She blinked her bright eyes and looked at Feng Qianche with a sweet smile. Her face was filled with a moved look. Feng Qianche's brows slightly moved and his eyes had a trace of gentleness. Looking at her smile at this moment, he was in a daze. You're welcome. He strangely said these 3 words. This was his first time saying these 3 words since he was born. Ding, affection has increased by 5. Mission completion rate is now 20%. There were some people who would unknowingly give you warmth. It wasn't too deep or too shallow, it was just right. She suddenly felt that she strangely liked Feng Qianche. It wasn't because he was the male lead, and it wasn't because they had experienced a long time together. Rather, it was because of his small actions that made people feel that liking someone was a very simple matter. Under the moonlight and stars, the temperature on the snow-capped peak was several times colder than at the foot of the mountain. Even though she was wearing a thick coat, Luo Qingchen could feel the cold wind blowing in her direction. It was bone-chilling. Feng Qianche's mother's memorial tablet was placed in Qingxin Temple at the top of the snowy peak. When Feng Qianche saw the abbot, he bowed deeply. The abbot looked quite old, but he was still full of vigor, giving people a feeling that he was old but vigorous. It was just that this cold night was really hard to sleep. Even though she was wrapped in a blanket, she still felt a bone-piercing cold wind. She thought, if an assassin came at this time, they probably wouldn't be able to escape. As it turned out, the assassin did not want to come to this damned place in the middle of the night. After all, life was precious. The next morning, Feng Qianche changed into a long white robe. When she knelt in front of the coffin, there was some gentleness in her eyes. Mother, we haven't seen each other for a year. How have you been? I'm fine. Don't worry. In the past few days, the 9th Emperor has been restless and has sent assassins to kill me several times. All of them have been killed by me. He talked for a long time, sometimes muttering and sometimes revealing a faint smile. Luo Qingchen suddenly found that she was looking at a different Feng Qianche, a crown prince with flesh and blood. When she said her final words, Luo Qingchen couldn't help being stunned. Chapter 2040. The joyous union bell that you left for this child was accidentally broken by someone else. This child originally planned to use it as a sacrifice to you today. When Feng Qianche said these words, Luo Qingchen could feel her feet slowly move in the snow. What did he mean? Could it be that he really wanted her to be a sacrifice? Was it really that ruthless? That joyous union bell could be reused after being used once. She was a person, a living person. After being sacrificed once, the second sacrifice would probably be her soul. When Luo Qingchen's mind was filled with messy thoughts, Feng Qianche continued to slowly speak, but this child is a little reluctant. If you were still here, you would probably like this girl. Narcissistic and egotistical. She has a pride that others don't have, but it also makes people feel very comfortable. Hearing Feng Qianche's words, her originally cold and pale face could not help but reveal a faint blush. She felt like she was listening to a confession, but this was not a confession. She stood behind him like this and watched as he bowed 3 times in the direction of the coffin before slowly standing up. The snowy peaks that were covered in snow all year round seemed to have stopped snowing at this moment. He slowly turned around and tied the 2 broken joyous union bells to her waist. After a long time he said, "I'll put yours down first. Once it's fixed, give it to me." Luo Qingchen looked up with a bit of doubt in her eyes as she seriously looked at him. Her lips curled into a smile as she said, "You just said that you couldn't bear to part with me and now you're giving me this bell. Could it be that you're giving me a token of love?" At this time, Feng Qianche, who was helping her tie the joyous union bells, was slightly startled. He suddenly looked up and a pair of deep eyes entered her eyes. He said with a gentle smile, "Truly narcissistic." Actually, Luo Qingchen was not completely sure what Feng Qianche was thinking. After all, to use 20% of the affection to probe a crown prince's heart was just too difficult. But Master did not directly answer my question. Her brows slightly moved and her eyes were filled with anticipation. Feng Qianche looked at her like this and felt an inexplicable nervousness. This nervousness was different from her usual nervousness. He knew that it came from her eyes. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Little did he know that in the next second, before he could reply, a long arrow brushed past them and pierced into the abbot's chest. In the blink of an eye, Feng Qianche grabbed Luo Qingchen's hand and jumped backwards with a little qinggong, rushing towards the abbot's position. Luo Qingchen was stunned for a moment. She looked around as fast as she could. There was only one entrance to this Qingsen temple, and it was at the very top of the snow-capped mountain. In front of it was the road they took to come here, and behind it was a cliff. Along the way, Feng Qianche's personal bodyguards had made a mark. If someone followed them up the mountain, he would definitely know. But now, even the arrows were flying out, and they didn't even see the enemy's shadow. Luo Qingchen's brain raced. In this case, there was only one possibility. In the next second, she looked to the side at Feng Qianche, who was standing beside her. She saw his brows tightly knit together as he stared forward. His thin lips softly said to her, "Find a sword and protect yourself." At this time, shouldn't he be the hero saving the beauty, protecting her behind him and saying, "Don't worry, I will protect you"? Chapter 2041. It was probably because Luo Qingchen's expression was too shocked that Feng Qianche did not forget to add, "Your swordsmanship is not bad, you should be able to survive." Luo Qingchen bit her lips and said, "You? How many of you betrayed me?" In this kind of place where the road ahead was difficult and the road behind was steep, if there were still hidden arrows while guarding the front door, it proved that there were enemies among the personal guards that followed Feng Qianche up the mountain. But how many, Luo Qingchen did not know. As for the death warriors by my side, if there were others who sneaked in, Dong Liang would have discovered it before we set off or even on the road. He slowly pulled out his sword. His brows were tightly knitted as he said, "Then if no one discovered it at this time, it can only prove—" "Dong Liang betrayed you?" Luo Qingchen's eyes were filled with shock, and when she spoke, she felt that her voice was unconsciously trembling. It was no wonder that for someone as careful as Feng Qianche, wanting to put him in a difficult situation was not an easy matter. Clap, 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 clap. A clear clap sounded and the main door of the temple was slowly opened. Dong Liang, who was originally guarding outside, pushed the door open and entered. The air was instantly filled with the smell of blood. "Master is truly worthy of being called master, you actually guessed it right." Dong Liang narrowed his eyes and said with an expression of absolute danger, "I thought you would guess that I died in battle, I did not think that you would actually guess that I am the betrayer." According to Dong Liang's personality, if he was not a traitor, even if there was a disaster, he would think of a way to rush in and inform me. It would not be the arrows that arrived first, but you did not. Feng Qianche glanced at the dying abbot behind him and said with a frown, "If I had not walked in Qing's direction, I'm afraid that the one who fell would be me." Feng Qianche's indifferent eyes did not show the slightest ripple, as if Dong Liang's betrayal did not affect his emotions at all. "I have to say, Master, you are really calm." Dong Liang shook his head with some pity, however, "You still trusted in the end. So much so that you did not even notice that there were a few unfamiliar guards by your side." "So you are one of Feng Zhi's people?" Feng Qianche's cold eyes narrowed. "So when did you become one of their people?" He was indeed puzzled about this. After all, Dong Liang was not his only secret guard. However, he didn't receive any news that something was wrong with him. "I am indeed the 9th prince's man." Dong Liang nodded slightly and looked at him, saying, "But it's not about when you became one of them. You've always been one of them." When Luo Qingchen heard this, her eyes were filled with shock. She glanced sideways at Feng Qianche and asked, "How long has he been by your side?" 5 years. When Dong Liang first came to the Crown Prince's eastern palace, He was neither outstanding nor ordinary. He would not deliberately show off his merits, but he was able to complete all his tasks properly. It was probably because of this personality that Feng Qianche noticed him half a year later. In these 5 years, he had gone from a little guard that no one knew of to a popular person by Feng Qianche's side. He treated him well, and he did his best to complete every task for him. However, they were not on the same side. Yes, unknowingly, it's been 5 years. The 9th prince has always been waiting for an opportunity, but you've been too cautious. Dong Liang said with a self-deprecating smile, every year I've accompanied you here, but every year I'm not the only one who's been tailing the enemy. He paused for a moment before continuing. I had no choice but to poison Mo who before I left, blinding him so that he could not come to the Snow Peak Mountain with you. Chapter 2042. You've played this game of chess quite well. Feng Qianche narrowed his eyes as he looked at him. It's a pity that you're doing all this for a prince that's about to fall. Is it worth it? As long as you die, he will be the crown prince. Dong Liang narrowed his eyes and said, Your Highness, I owe you in this life. But our family's lives were saved by the 9th prince, so I must return this favor. I'm afraid you won't have this chance. In the next second, he waved the long sword in his hand and cut down the wooden stake beside him. His eyes emitted an extreme chill as he looked at him. The relationship between you and me as master and servant is over. Dong Liang's brows knit, and he led the dozens of black-clothed people behind him to surround them. Luo Qingchen took a step back and used the stone pillar to block herself. She then took out the Phoenix Dance sword from her storage space. The sword light suddenly appeared in the white snow. The heavy snow swirled in the air, and the aura of a battle spread around everyone. Feng Qianche took a step back in her direction and a voice as cool as water entered her ears. You leave first. Feng Qianche's brows slightly knit as he said, There should be 1 or 2 people following you. Take care of it yourself. Luo Qingchen bit her lips and said, What's there to run for? Fight it out with him. She hated this kind of person who used other people's trust and used unscrupulous method. Since he can hide so many people by my side and endure for so long, he chose to reveal his identity today. This proves, he narrowed his cold eyes and said, he has the confidence to kill me. At this moment, Luo Qingchen felt some admiration for Feng Qianche. After all, in a life and death situation, he was able to analyze the situation so clearly. That's not 100% certainty. Luo Qingchen still wanted to say something, but she was interrupted by him. If you're here, I'll be distracted. She knit her brows and a faint mist flashed in her eyes. She was still a little moved. Perhaps a 20% favorability was enough for him to care about her life and death. I won't distract you. As soon as her voice fell, she rushed into the crowd with her Phoenix Dance sword without another word. She was probably such a person. If you treated her with sincerity, she would also treat you with sincerity. Feng Qianche clearly did not react as she stood there in a daze for a few seconds. She held a long sword in her hand and rushed into the crowd in a black robe. Her clear eyes were instantly suffused with a touch of frost. The sword in his hand fell, and blood dyed the white snow red. This was the first time she had felt touched. A person she had met by chance was actually willing to sacrifice everything for her and kill his way into the crowd. Don't ask about the past, don't ask about the past, don't ask about life or death, ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 30%. In fact, Luo Qingchen wasn't surprised at all by the prompt. She knew that when she decided to stay and fight alongside Feng Qianche, she would definitely become different in his eyes. She still had this bit of confidence. However, don't just stand there. Luo Qingchen pursed her lips. Using her qinggong, she panted as she looked at him and said, Quickly come and help. Feng Qianche narrowed his cold eyes and quickly arrived beside her. His right hand pulled her behind him, and he said in a voice filled with accusation, Nonsense. It doesn't count. After that, her lips slightly curled and she revealed a proud smile as she said, I took care of 3. Chapter 2043. Feng Qianche gave a soft snort and her eyes were filled with disdain as she looked at him. Do you think you can live until then? Your Highness, why don't you take a look at the roof first? In the next second, a row of archers appeared on the roof. They were all dressed in night clothes and had their faces covered, making it impossible to see their faces. But what was certain was that the arrow had come from the side. It seemed that they had already made preparations. We can't fight here. It's easy to dodge an open attack, but hard to defend against an arrow in the dark. Luo Qingchen knit her brows and said, Is there any other path we can take? Feng Qianche tightly knit her brows and there was a dark light in her deep eyes. Her thin lips softly said, We definitely can't pass through the path ahead. Behind the temple is a cliff. A cliff is a cliff. In an instant, she raised her right hand and the phoenix dance sword stirred up a snowflake. She reached out to grab Feng Qianche's hand and walked into Qingxin Temple. Humph. In the next second, Dong Liang gave a snort and said, A turtle in a jar. You guys guard the door. Don't let even a fly fly out. After he finished instructing the archers, he said to the dozen death warriors behind him, You guys come with me to meet them. For Dong Liang, he was not in a hurry at all, because Feng Qianche had nowhere to run. At this moment, there was only one outcome for him. That was, waiting for death. When Luo Qingchen arrived at the cliff behind the temple, her heart instantly jumped into her throat. The snow in the sky became heavier and heavier. From where she was, the cliff seemed to be towering in the clouds, so deep that she could not see the bottom. Dong Liang unhurriedly chased after her with more than 10 well-trained men in black behind him. I said before, you can't run. Dong Liang helplessly shrugged and said, Perhaps your Highness can cut off your own arms. That way, you might have a chance to live. Luo Qingchen looked at Dong Liang's expression, and it did not seem like he was mocking her. People's hearts were made of flesh. After 5 years of master and servant relationship, he used the other party's trust to turn the tables. His heart was filled with guilt. Perhaps he thought that this was Feng Qianche's only hope to live. After all, a person with broken arms could not become a future emperor, but he could live on. You've been by my side for so many years, don't tell me you still don't understand my temper? His cold eyes narrowed as his entire body emitted waves of coldness. Heavy snow swirled in the sky and behind him was a cliff. Feng Qianche held a sword in his left hand. His moon-white clothes were stained with blood from the battle earlier, making him look particularly ghastly. If she hadn't seen it, Luo Qingchen probably wouldn't have known that he was injured. Then I'm afraid I'll have to say goodbye to your Highness. With that, he raised his right hand and the archers behind him immediately took their positions. He narrowed his eyes and said, Release the arrows. Feng Qianche forcefully pushed Luo Qingchen back. She only felt her body become unstable in an instant. Her right foot dangled in the air beside the cliff and rubbed against it a few times. Fine rocks fell into the abyss. I finally let you know why you came to this cliff? Feng Qianche's brows slightly moved. In this moment of life and death, the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled into a faint smile. He turned to look at her and said, So Miss Qing wants to die with me. Chapter 2044. What she didn't know was that in the blink of an eye, Feng Qianche's right hand pulled back and Luo Qingchen, standing on the edge of the cliff, into his embrace. Luo Qingchen was stunned. Before she could react, Feng Qianche was holding her as they fell into the 10,000-foot abyss. My God! She called out in shock as the sound of the wild wind filled her ears. The moment they fell off the cliff, Feng Qianche's body fell down. When he looked at her, he was against the light of the snow. In those deep eyes, there was a faint trace of gentleness. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 40%. Luo Qingchen's expression, she didn't want to die yet. Space and time freeze. After saying these 4 words in her heart, the scene around her instantly froze. 3 meters below her was the bottom of the cliff. The delicate snowflakes fell onto Feng Qianchei's long lashes. He seriously looked into her eyes, and there was a clear reflection of her in them. The space and time freeze lasted for a long time. It should be because of the increase in level that she had a chance to stand outside the space and seriously look at Feng Qianchei's face. His white clothes were as good as before. He really looked good. Ping! She didn't calculate the time properly and the space and time freeze ended. Feng Qianchei tightly knit his brows before a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Falling from such a high cliff, why didn't he feel any chaos in the aura in his body? He thought that if he was lucky, he would at least have 7-8 broken ribs, but his body didn't feel any pain at all. Luo Qingchen looked at him and slowly stood up. She patted off the snow on her and reached out her hand to him. Quickly get up! Feng Qianchei was stunned and he couldn't help placing his hand in her palm. The moment he touched her, a faint warmth flowed through his body. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 50%. Ha ha, it's finally 50%. If Feng Qianchei placed a sword on her neck now, she would definitely say, "Kill, kill, kill. Kill as you wish. If you're willing, it's my loss. Are we at the bottom of the cliff?" Feng Qianchei's voice had a trace of uncertainty and his beautiful eyes looked very cute. "Yeah." Luo Qingchen climbed up the snow-covered rock and replied, "But it's so cold here." Feng Qianchei looked around. Logically speaking, it should be noon right now, but this place was foggy and the temperature was extremely low. This might be the so-called unbounded land. Feng Qianchei's eyebrows slightly knit together as she said, "The temperature at night should be at least twice as low as it is now." "What? Double?" Luo Qingchen blinked in panic. What kind of place is the unbounded land? Wouldn't he have frozen to death? At this temperature, she felt that if she didn't move for a long time, she might freeze to death. "Yes. I'll go around and see if there are any living creatures or withered grass. Stay where you are and don't move. It's going to be dark soon." Luo Qingchen nodded casually and said, "There seems to be an igloo over there. How could there be a house at the bottom of the cliff where no one would pass through for hundreds of years? Then let's go take a look first." Feng Qianchei narrowed his eyes as a faint trace of worry flashed in his eyes. In this white snowy land, some places looked very close, but were actually very far away. Chapter 2045. Feng Qianchei took out a flame from his pocket and gently pushed the door. With a "kacha" sound, the thick snow fell down from the door. When he touched her white cheeks, he felt an icy chill. "Move back a bit." Feng Qianchei's cool as water voice entered her ears. She felt that, unknowingly, he had become especially gentle. There shouldn't be anyone here. Luo Qingchen looked at the spider webs around her and said, "Have all the spiders in this place turned into snow spiders?" After that, Feng Qianchei's right hand shook and the white spider fell to the ground. He knit his brows and said, "It's poisonous." As soon as his voice fell, he walked in while saying, "But we can live in this place for a few days." Although there was a thick layer of dust on the wooden pile, there was a candlestick that had some wax inside. Although it was covered in snow, there was a flame that could be lit. Not long ago, there should have been people living here, but there was no one after that. Luo Qingchen looked around and said, "Based on the thickness of the dust, it should have been around 20 years ago." Feng Qianchei knit his brows and there was a strange throbbing in his heart. He felt that there was a different feeling in his heart after entering this room. It wasn't fear or uneasiness. Perhaps it was longing. It was very late at night and the sky was dark. Other than the snow, there was more snow. It was unknown where Feng Qianchei had gotten a few fish. After making a fire, it was very fragrant. There's still fish in such a cold place? Luo Qingchen smelled the fragrance of the fish and her stomach began to grumble. She suddenly missed the snacks she bought from the town, especially the tonghulu that looked very tempting. On the way here, she had fought and jumped off a cliff, so she had already exhausted her strength. Have you heard of the story of crouching on the ice to find carp? Feng Qianche helplessly shook his head. Seeing her drooling over the food, his lips couldn't help curling into a faint smile. Far away from the ice-cold palace, far away from the noise of Chang'an. At this moment, in this desolate and dilapidated house, he actually felt an inexplicable warmth. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 60%. So you just went to ice? Luo Qingchen was stunned for a moment. She looked Feng Qianche up and down, her eyes filled with disbelief. He looked at her with a helpless expression and said, I have a sword. Oh, I knew it. She smiled awkwardly and muttered softly, how can body temperature melt ice so quickly? Feng Qianche probably heard her whispered words and his deep eyes narrowed as he said, you think that my embrace isn't warm enough, but when I jumped off the cliff, my clothes were torn by you. I was just nervous. Luo Qingchen's eyes trembled in embarrassment. Who wouldn't be nervous in that kind of situation? Then why are you blushing now? His starry eyes carried a faint light as he stared at her seriously. There were some things that she wouldn't be this nervous if she didn't say it, but once she said it, she could feel her heart beating fast and it couldn't be controlled at all. She saw Feng Qianche slowly stand up. While looking at her deeply, he slowly walked in her direction. Chapter 2046. There was a faint fragrance in the air that seemed to be coming from his body. The ambiguous atmosphere was inadvertently ignited. Feng Qianche looked at her long and curly eyelashes, her slightly pursed lips, and her hands nervously holding her outer robe. His heart was strangely filled with joy. This kind of joy suddenly gave him an answer in his heart. He thought that with his personality that only loved himself, there would be no one that would move his heart. Even the future crown princess and the empress existed for his power and benefits. But in this moment, he changed his original thoughts. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 70%. When he was about to lean over and kiss her, the painting behind him that was covered in dust attracted his eyes. He narrowed his eyes and his heart couldn't help trembling. Luo Qingchen, who had her eyes tightly closed, felt the person in front of her brush past her. She immediately opened her eyes and the blush spread to her ears. Damn it! At this moment, she wanted to find a hole to hide in because it really was embarrassing. Feng Qianche, Luo Qingchen might as well go all out. She turned around to look at him with an angry expression and said, affection has already increased, but you actually... Before her voice fell, her eyes were also attracted by the girl in the painting. Although the painting was covered in dust, it could still be seen that the girl in the painting was very beautiful. It was as if no beautiful words could describe her beauty. That kind of beauty that made people suffocate. Could it be that Feng Qianche had taken a liking to her? After that, the doubt in her heart was immediately denied by herself. No one had come to this place for around 20 years. If this girl had this kind of appearance back then, she should be in her early 40s now. It shouldn't be considered liking her. But why was Feng Qianche so entranced by it? What is it? She carefully opened her mouth and broke the silence in the room. Qing, help me bring the candle over. Because he had made a decision in his heart, he would unconsciously change the way he called her. He always felt that if he called her like this, she would be his. In this world, no one could take her away. Oh, all right. Luo Qingchen listened to his gentle voice and instantly turned into an obedient child. She picked up the candle on the table and walked in his direction. Feng Qianche gently brushed away the dust on the painting. Under the illumination of the candlelight, her face appeared even more alluring. Do you know her? Looking at Feng Qianche's focused appearance, Luo Qingchen felt that she probably knew her. That pair of eyes that were as deep as ink emitted not the light of adoration, but of longing. She's my mother. Feng Qianche carefully removed the painting from the wall. Her eyebrows moved slightly as she said, "It should be that person's portrait of my mother." That person? Luo Qingchen's gaze fell on the bottom right corner of the painting. Signed, Commoner. Actually, the person that my imperial mother loves is not my imperial father. Feng Qianche's slender fingertips brushed across the scroll as she narrowed her eyes and sighed. "Do you want to hear a story?" "I want to hear it." She sat on the bed that had been cleaned and closed her eyes. "I think it's probably a sad story." Chapter 2047. On this cold and silent night, Luo Qingchen seemed to have heard a sad story similar to the original owner's. But the story was not a copy, but a different kind of sadness. Feng Qianche's mother was named Ling Long. She and Commoner Yi were childhood sweethearts. When the two were young, they made a promise to each other, but Commoner Yi would never know that Ling Long was just too beautiful. She was so beautiful that when the Phoenix Emperor saw her for the first time, he could not forget her. Ling Long was not a descendant of a famous family, and could at most be considered a young miss of a scholarly family. Commoner Yi was just a scholar. The two families could be considered a match. They thought that after they grew up, they would have a beautiful story. But they never imagined that an accident would cause them to lose each other. That year, the snow was very thick. Ling Long happened to be going out to buy some bonuses for finished product. Little did she know that she would bump into the Phoenix Emperor's carriage. 10,000 years in one glance, love at first sight. When the Phoenix Emperor saw her, he was captivated by her beauty. After returning to the palace, he quickly called for her to enter the palace. Ling Long did not understand at the time. The depths of the palace were hard to enter, but it was even harder to leave. The Phoenix Emperor clearly expressed his love for her, and wanted to take her as his concubine. The Ling Long of that year was young and frivolous. After righteously rejecting him, she said the name of the person she loved in front of the Phoenix Emperor. The Phoenix Emperor immediately sent Commoner Yi to the death row and announced that he would be executed after autumn. At that moment, Ling Long understood that some people's love could not be rejected because she did not have the qualifications to refuse. But she loved Commoner Yi. Even if she lived a simple life, she was willing to live in seclusion with Commoner Yi and live a life with only the two of them. Because of the obsession in her heart, she had a plan. She pretended to submit to the Phoenix Emperor, and said that if he let Commoner Yi go, she would marry him as his concubine. But before she married him, he could not touch her. Otherwise, she would rather die with Commoner Yi. In the end, the Phoenix Emperor agreed. But the Phoenix Emperor never thought that Ling Long would make all the arrangements on the day of the wedding and leave the palace with Commoner Yi. But they were only normal people, so how could they escape the Phoenix Emperor's palm? They ran all the way up Snow Peak Mountain. Finally, Phoenix Tharch sent people to surround the mountain and went up personally. When Feng Qianche spoke to this point, she stopped. Luo Qingchen was somewhat fascinated by what she heard and hurriedly asked, And then? I don't know what happened after that." His eyebrows moved slightly, and his eyes carried a probing look as he said, "I only know that back then, only Imperial Mother went down the mountain alone, and I didn't see the silhouette of the commoner. It seems that he came here?" Luo Qingchen's gaze landed on the painting in Feng Qianche's hand and continued, "But Emperor Feng married your mother in the end." "Yes, he loved her crazily." Feng Qianche gently smiled and shook her head. Even if tens of thousands of people tried to stop him, he never changed his original intentions. "So you are the crown prince." "He loves my mother. There are 3,000 beauties in the harem, but he only loves my mother." Feng Qianche helplessly smiled. "Unfortunately, the love of an emperor is the most dangerous." "Danger?" Luo Qingchen narrowed her eyes and said, "Could it be that your mother was—" "That's right." Feng Qianche raised her eyebrows and said, "Imperial father killed many people. As long as there were suspicions, he killed them all. But so what? My mother will never be able to come back to life." When Luo Qingchen heard this, she gently patted his back and said, "Since you've taken your revenge, don't take it to heart. Chapter 2048. No Revenge. Luo Qingchen was stunned for a moment. She looked at him and said, "Didn't you say that the Phoenix Emperor killed your mother's murderer? Those people were just scapegoats." Feng Qianche's cold eyes narrowed as he said, "The true mastermind behind the scenes has always been in the palace." Hearing Feng Qianche's words, Luo Qingchen was a little confused. She only saw him gently shake his head and say, "The problem is that I can't take revenge." "Why?" Luo Qingchen's clear eyes trembled, and she said with a frown, "The Phoenix Emperor likes your mother so much, he should support you. One is my mother who gave birth to me, and the other is the Empress who raised me. What do you think I should choose?" His voice was filled with helplessness. He gently raised his right hand and brushed it across her face with a faint pampering look in his eyes. "What? The Empress killed your mother?" Luo Qingchen cried out in surprise. She grabbed his hand and a bone-chilling cold spread through her palm. He faintly nodded his head and leaned against the other side of the bed as he slowly closed his eyes. Luo Qingchen held his hand and looked at his snowy white brows. She nervously said, "Feng Qianche." He did not respond and his long eyelashes gently trembled on his white cheeks. Luo Qingchen quickly came to his side and touched his forehead. It was cold. She touched his face. It was cold. The temperature here should be around -40 degrees Celsius. His white clothes, which were not considered warm, seemed especially thin in this place. "Don't sleep." Luo Qingchen gently shook his shoulder. She looked at him with a panicked expression and said, "Feng Qianche, don't sleep." Feng Qianche, who was half leaning against the wooden bed, did not react at all. He still had his eyes closed as if he had fallen into a deep sleep. In the next second, Luo Qingchen quickly took off her long coat. Just as she was about to put it on Feng Qianche, the youth who had been sleeping beside her suddenly opened his eyes. His right hand suddenly grabbed her arm and pulled her into his embrace. Before she could react, his cool voice rang in her ears, "I tied a dead knot. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 80%. It was as if he had been waiting for an opportunity, an excuse, a perfect opportunity to embrace her without any warning. Feng Qianche. Luo Qingchen's eyes were slightly red as she gritted her teeth and said, "What are you doing?" At that moment, she could feel the fear in the depths of her heart. She was afraid that the person who had always been by her side would suddenly leave her. This kind of fear almost occupied her entire heart. Until now, he still hadn't completely recovered from his shock. "I just wanted to see you nervous." He chuckled and tightened his arms around her. He looked at her and said, "If we can return to Chang'an, I'll go and ask for your hand in marriage, okay?" Ask for her hand in marriage? In that instant, Luo Qingchen suddenly thought of her own identity. She was the daughter of Grand Scholar Luo Lin. She didn't know if the Luo and Rong families had already fallen out with her sudden disappearance. But this was also good. The previous host had suffered such grievances, and she was filled with envy. She would take back the things she had never obtained before. "Your Highness doesn't even know who I am and you're asking for my hand in marriage?" Luo Qingchen raised her brows with a smile and said, "If I was the daughter of a traitor, would you still ask for my hand in marriage?" Chapter 2049. "What?" She slightly nodded and looked at him with clear eyes. The corners of her lips slightly rose as she said, "Could it be that your Highness the Crown Prince plans on having 3,000 beauties in your harem?" These words were meant to tease him, but she did not know that he would give her a direct counterattack in the next second. It was not a retort or a taunt, but rather without another word. He sealed it with a kiss. She nervously closed her eyes and felt the lingering coolness with a bit of sweetness. After a long time, he finally slowly let her go. She immediately touched her red ears and cleared her throat as she said, Did I say something wrong?" He looked at her cute appearance. She was so nervous that she was stuttering and he could not help curling his lips into a smile as he said, What do you think you said was right? It seems like I said something wrong. She cleared her throat and said, Then you can't steal a kiss from me. In that instant, she seemed to have found a reason, and her tone suddenly became confident. Little did she know that in the next second, Feng Qianche raised his right hand and wrapped it around her neck. He deeply kissed her and said, I didn't steal a kiss, I did it openly. Actually, his kiss was very gentle. It was not a particularly domineering kiss, rather it was gentle like water with a touch of delicateness. It left people with a feeling of endless aftertaste. What was she thinking? Then aren't you cold? She changed the topic and touched his face with a bit of heartache as she said, It's ice cold. Then let me hold you. Feng Qianche seriously looked at her and said with a pampering gaze, So liking someone feels like this. What does it feel like? She blinked and looked at him as she asked. Feng Qianche heard this and slowly pulled her into his embrace. He gently patted her back and said, Complacent with the hardships of the world, waiting to grow old with you. She closed her eyes and felt the strong beating of his heart as she fell into a deep sleep. On this night filled with wind and snow, she had a dream. In the dream, she saw Ling Long and Bu Yi from the past. Before Ling Long was taken back, she and Bu Yi had always lived in this room. Although the time was short, it was the happiest time of their lives. After Ling Long was forced back to the palace, Bu Yi had been waiting in this room. Day after day, year after year, he finally received the news of Ling Long's death. He had silently gone with her just now, or the dream was very blurry. She didn't know if it was real or not, but when she woke up, her heart couldn't calm down. It wasn't the bleakness of the story that moved her, but the fact that they couldn't be together even though they were clearly in love was too cruel. The next morning, when Luo Qingchen woke up, Feng Qianche had caught 2 more fish, and the aroma filled the air. After we finish eating, we have to think of a way to go up. Feng Qianche looked at her and said, Just now I saw a small path in front of the lake. There should be a chance to go up. How did you know? This small path should have been left behind by Bai all those years ago. Feng Qianche's brows twitched slightly as she said, After all, he would definitely have gone there to inquire about my mother. That makes sense. Luo Qingchen nodded and recalled last night's dream. And after he knew that your mother had passed away, he should have committed suicide. Although a dream was a dream, her dream was definitely related to reality. After all, she was clear in her heart that not only could her dream predict the future, it could also peek into the past. How did you know? Chapter 2050. Feng Qianche's analysis was most likely correct. Although the path was covered in shrubs, it was still a path. It was a bit difficult to walk, but that did not mean it was impossible. Luo Qingchen carefully followed behind him. He helped her cut off the branches and grass before letting her walk forward. She followed behind him like this. Seeing his white robes and wide shoulders, she felt at ease. She was finally going back. Feng Qianche had enemies, but so did she. It had been many days since the original host had obtained the divorce letter and jumped into the lake. The relationship between the Luo and Rong families must have reached a freezing point. In the bustling Chang'an, the Rong manor was surrounded. This was already the 3rd day. Rong Mu Ling had sent servants to guard the door, not letting anyone in. Whether it was the streets or the palace, this matter had already spread like wildfire. After Luo Qingchen, the only daughter of the grand scholar Luo Lin, married into the Rong manor, she had been treated coldly by Rong Mu Ling for 3 years. In the end, she was even given a divorce letter. Luo Qingchen's heart was like stagnant water, and she jumped into the lake to commit suicide. But in the large lake, the divorce letter was found, but Luo Qingchen's body was not found. The Luo and Rong families were both important figures in the court. Even if they sent out their own guards, the local officials of Chang'an did not dare stop them. They could only watch the situation develop and wait for the Feng Emperor to question them. Luo Lin's attitude was very firm. He had to have Rong Mu Ling hand over Lan Lingqian, a life for a life. But even if Rong Sin and Madame Rong came to Rong Mu Ling's manor, the door was still closed. And no one knew that Rong Mu Ling did not have the ability to hand over Lan Lingqian. Because the day after Luo Qingchen jumped into the lake, Lan Lingqian disappeared. She never came back again. These days, Rong Mu Ling did not come out. It was not because he was afraid of the Luo family. It was because he had already drunk every night to numb his heart. "Young master, don't drink any more." The housekeeper handed him a hot towel and said, "Master and Madam are outside the door. The Grand Secretary said that if you don't come out, he will set fire to our Rong estate." "Ha ha ha ha," he laughed at himself and said, "let him burn that side. He's right, a life for a life. I owe my life to Luo Qingchen." Rong Mu Ling was not a fool. After being an official for so many years, how could he not see through the conspiracy in the current situation? It was just that he had been blinded by his own deep love, causing him to be blinded by the situation in the previous days. Lan Lingqian entered the palace 3 years ago and had already become the Empress's servant. Although the Empress was not the Crown Prince's birth mother, she doted on him a lot. Now that the Rong family was very close to the 9th prince, the Empress was naturally worried that this power would affect the Crown Prince, so she let Lan Lingqian return to his side. But he never would have thought that she would use their relationship as husband and wife, using their child to make him divorce Luo Qingchen, causing the Rong and Luo families to completely break apart. Without the support of the Luo family, even if the Rong family and the 9th prince worked together, it would be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. "Young master, this matter cannot be entirely blamed on you." The housekeeper sighed deeply and said, "I have already sent people to find Miss Lan, no need." He sneered and waved his hand, saying, "She will not come back. Maybe I did not see it clearly before, but her sudden departure is the best proof." From beginning to end, it was a trap set by Lan Lingqian. She used his sincerity to reach her goal step by step. Chapter 2051. Power? Status? Money? Love? These 4 things, he could give her any one of them. He could plant pear blossoms in the Rong estate for her. He could give up many opportunities in the imperial court for her. He could even divorce his wife, who had never done anything wrong, for 3 years for her. No, not divorce, it could be said that he killed her with his own hand. Pring! The door was suddenly pushed open and Luo Lin stormed in. The ground was covered in pear blossoms and the air was filled with the fragrance of pear blossoms. Rong Sun and Madame Rong quickly followed, afraid that Luo Lin would hurt their son. For them, it was difficult. Their son did do something wrong and killed the daughter of a family friend. But he was still their son, a life for a life. They were naturally unwilling. "Rong Mu Ling, return my daughter's life." Luo Lin roared and took the sword from the guard beside him, stabbing it towards Rong Mu Ling. He sneered and drank a mouthful of wine before slamming the wine pot on the ground. "Take it away! I will pay for what I owe her." "Don't." Madame Rong rushed up and stood in front of Rong Mu Ling. She looked at Luo Lin with tears in her eyes. "Scholar, let my son go. I will pay for Qingchen's life for him." With that, Madame Rong picked up the sword on the ground and was about to cut her neck. "Mother." Rong Mu Ling immediately took the sword from Madame Rong's hand and said coldly, "Her body hasn't been found yet, right? If she is really dead, I will pay for it with my life, but please don't make things difficult for my parents." Pa! A crisp slap landed on Rong Mu Ling's face. Rong Sen's hands trembled as he said, "I told you not to marry that woman, but you didn't listen. Others might not know why she performed the rainbow dress dance, but how could I not know?" He had been in the imperial court for many years and knew what some people were thinking with just a glance. Moreover, when the Empress invited her into the palace, she immediately kowtowed to thank her and never returned to the Rong estate. Whether it was Madame Rong or him, they both regretted saving Lan Lingqian in front of the brothel. Nurturing a tiger would only bring disaster to the Rong family. "Father, don't say any more." Rong Mu Ling took a deep breath and said, It's all my fault, it has nothing to do with her, Ling. Why are you still protecting that woman at a time like this? Madame Rong cried out with all her might, she's just trying to come back to you. You? Sigh, at this moment, Rong Mu Ling's heart was dead. His gaze suddenly fixed on the pear blossom tree not far away. He laughed self-deprecatingly and said, if you don't fall and shatter your bones, how would you know pain? He had spent his entire life loving only one person. But she didn't stop drawing a line on his heart that was riddled with holes. Actually, he no longer felt pain. Because the old and new wounds were added together. His heart had long since become numb. After the commotion, Lorraine gradually calmed down. Rong Mu Ling was right about one thing. His precious daughter's corpse had not been found yet, so he could not be completely sure that she was dead. Rather than spending manpower to block the entrance of the Rong estate and not being able to kill Rong Mu Ling, it was better to send more people to search for his daughter. Perhaps there was still a chance of survival. Chapter 2052. At the same time, in Wei Yang Palace. In the magnificent palace, the air was filled with the faint scent of sandalwood. The Empress was half leaning on the couch, and beside her was Lan Lingqian, who had already returned to the palace. You've done very well in this matter. She slowly took off the jade bracelet in her hand and said, this is your reward. Lan Lingqian revealed a faint smile and took the jade bracelet from the Empress' hand. This is what Lingqian should do. I don't know when I'll be able to see His Highness the Crown Prince again. She had schemed and schemed, even at the cost of a small fortune, not because of any reward, but because she wanted to walk to the side of her sweetheart who she had seen for 10,000 years. Lan Lingqian understood in her heart that she had hurt many people along the way. She knew that she was a bad person, but she did not care. Because she was approaching Feng Qianche step by step, approaching that unreachable dream. The Crown Prince went to Shuefeng Mountain to pay respects to his mother, and has yet to return. This one said that this is your last task. The Empress took a sip of Bai Luo Chun and said, even if you cannot marry into the Crown Prince's eastern palace, this one will not treat you unfairly. Hearing the Empress say this, Lan Lingqian's heart was filled with disappointment. She suddenly knelt down and said, Empress, Ling Qian's heart can be seen by the sun and moon. If I marry the Crown Prince, I will give up everything for his position and power. The Empress lowered her eyes and there was a flash of light in her eyes as she said, there are some things that this one cannot decide. After all, this one is not the Crown Prince's birth mother. If he wants to choose a princess, only the Emperor and himself can decide. Actually, the Empress was very clear in her heart that Lan Lingqian had already been bewitched by the Crown Prince. If she became the princess of the Crown Prince, she would do everything to help the Crown Prince. For Feng Qianche, this was definitely a matter with only benefits and no harm. Empress! Lan Lingqian heard this and tears began to fall. She said in a choked voice, does Lingqian really not have a chance? Silly girl, get up first. The Empress reached out to hold her hand and said, over the years, you have done so many things for the Crown Prince, and this one understands this. If possible, this consort also hopes that you can become his Crown Prince consort. After all, this consort also owes him. For so many years, the Empress did not have a son or daughter because of the existence of the Crown Prince. In fact, she was not an ambitious person, but she had done something wrong in the depths of the palace. Ling Long's death back then had something to do with her. If it wasn't for the fact that she didn't say anything despite knowing that there was something wrong with Ling Long's postpartum medicine, perhaps the Crown Prince wouldn't have been born without a mother. And the person who had tampered with Ling Long's soup was her mother. The Empress was from the Wang clan. Back then, they were quite influential in the previous dynasty. Her mother had to kill Ling Long for the sake of her position. After all, the Phoenix Emperor loved Ling Long too much. He could disregard everything for her and only take 1 out of 3,000. And this kind of love was actually a kind of danger. In the front court and the back court, every power was tangled and complicated. Although the love of an emperor was precious, it could not provide complete protection to the person it loved. Ling Long's death had become inevitable. Even if the Wang family did not take her on, someone else would. As the empress, Wang Mo had always felt guilty because of this matter. From then on, she raised Feng Qianche as her own child. Since she was young, if there was any danger in the future, she would use her methods to eliminate the danger. And now, most of the powers in the court were already on the crown prince's side. Only the Rong and Luo families supported the ninth prince. Chapter 2053. Luo Qingchen and Feng Qianche used a full day and night to walk from the bottom of the snowy mountain to the top. The road at the beginning was easier to walk and Feng Qianche was willing to let her walk a bit. Later on, the road was too bumpy and he was unwilling to let her walk and carried her to the top of the mountain. Luo Qingchen always had a feeling that she was a burden, but if it wasn't for Feng Qianche, she would have already used teleportation to return to Qingxin Temple. When I carried you on my back, I roughly knew a few things. Feng Qianche chuckled and his eyes carried a trace of affection. And? What is it? She buried her head in the hat and when she spoke, her voice was slightly muffled, but it sounded very cute. You're definitely not a girl from an ordinary family. Why? Because you're heavy. Luo Qingchen pretended to be angry and jumped down from his back. It's clearly your coat that's heavy, how can you say? In the next second, her mouth was covered by Feng Qianche. At this time, they were at the back door of Qingxin Temple, on the right side of the cliff. Feng Qianche could vaguely hear the sounds of conversation coming from the temple. Could it be that Dong Liang and the others had not left yet? There's someone? Luo Qingchen seemed to have also heard the sound. She opened her eyes and used her lips to say these two words. Feng Qianche nodded his head and pulled her behind him. It had to be said that 80% favorability was not the same as 20% favorability. She still remembered that when she only had 20% favorability, Feng Qianche had said to her to find a sword and protect herself. Today, he protected her behind him and did not let her draw her sword again. Feng Qianche walked to the other side of the window and gently opened it a little to observe the situation inside. White silk was hung high in the hall and there was a coffin placed in the middle. The people kneeling on both sides were monks from Qingxin Temple. There were only 2 guards wearing the same clothes as her guarding the door. Luo Qingchen felt a chill in her heart. They actually did not leave yet? Come with me. Feng Qianche's voice was no longer low and had returned to its original cool as water with a proud tone. What was this situation? Could it be that he planned to face her again? It shouldn't be with such doubts. Luo Qingchen followed behind him. When they reached the front door of the temple, a pleasant voice sounded. Who is it? A long sword quickly appeared in front of him, but in the next second, it fell to the ground with a clang. At this point, the row of guards standing not too far away all put down their swords and knelt on the ground. This lowly one came late to save your majesty. Greetings to your highness the crown prince. Yes. Feng Qianche narrowed her eyes. Her gaze was cold and arrogant as she looked at the handsome man in front of her and said, Mo Hu, has everything been taken care of? Your highness, everything has been taken care of. Mo Hu cupped his hands and bowed. If your highness hadn't held back, we would have lost this battle. Although I knew there was a traitor among my men of sacrifice, I didn't expect it to be Dong Liang. Feng Qianche's cold eyes narrowed as he softly said through his thin lips, He's been hiding for 5 years and he's been scheming this entire time. Dong Liang has already been escorted back to the Eastern Palace's prison. The rest of the traitors were not left alive. That's not important. Feng Qianche narrowed her eyes and said, You've done well. Mo Hu was stunned for a moment. He clearly did not expect Feng Qianche to praise him. While his eyes revealed joy, they also revealed disbelief. Chapter 2054. This is Mo, who looked at Luo Qingchen, who was wearing Feng Qianchei's robes, and carrying the joyous union bell, and a trace of confusion flashed through his eyes. The future crown prince consort. Feng Qianchei curled his lips into a smile, and his right hand gently rubbed her head. His eyes were filled with tenderness and love. Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. Mo, whose mouth was wide open in shock, and he did not recover for a long time. After paying respects to the abbot, Luo Qingchen followed Feng Qianchei back. Although this trip to Snowy Peak Mountain seemed to have only taken a few days, in their eyes, it was a very long time. When they returned to Chang'an, it was already 3 days later, and they were much slower than when they came. After all, he did not want his girl to suffer from the fatigue of the long journey, so their footsteps were much slower. Mo, whose expression was filled with shock the entire way, and most of his expression was stunned. Feng Qianchei smiled, he was shocked. Feng Qianchei's gentle words, he was shocked. Feng Qianchei was bullied by Luo Qingchen, he was even more shocked. The previous crown prince was always in existence as cold as an iceberg, but now he had changed. He had become more like a person of flesh and blood. Inside the carriage, their conversation could often be heard. It was mostly about the future crown prince consort seriously educating the crown prince. Feng Qianchei, can you not say such certain words in a situation where no one knows of my existence? Luo Qingchen pursed her lips. Although her heart was filled with joy, she was still very embarrassed. Not to mention his guards being shocked, even she herself was shocked. As the crown prince, Feng Qianchei had directly said that she was the crown prince consort without the consent of the Emperor Feng and the Empress. It would be strange if she was not shocked. Are you certain? Feng Qianchei's deep eyes were filled with a faint light as he said, "Oh, I know." Luo Qingchen saw his sudden realization and hurriedly said, "You're making me feel—" "I shouldn't say crown prince consort." He interrupted Luo Qingchen's words and curled his lips into a smile. "Should I say according to the common folk, you are my wife?" "Feng Qianchei, you're just a storyteller." Luo Qingchen blinked her clear eyes and said with a pout, "You're purposely trying to piss me off." He gently pinched her face and said, "The person I love, I will let the whole world know that I love her, no matter what the situation is. As long as you feel insecure, I will hold your hand tightly." Quang dang! The carriage suddenly fell into a large pit. Mo, who hurriedly lifted the curtain and said, "Master, I'll fix it immediately, I'll fix it immediately." Feng Qianchei's cold eyes narrowed as she gloomily looked at him and said, "I'll give you 15 minutes. Yes, yes, yes." At this moment, Mo, who was extremely nervous. It was all his fault for being so engrossed in their bickering that he didn't even notice the huge hole in front of him. Luo Qingchen, who was sitting in the carriage, lowered her eyes in embarrassment. She covered her face with her hands and murmured, "So shameful." "Will it?" Feng Qianchei looked at her with some confusion and asked, "Then how do the husbands of the common people express their love to their wives?" He had never loved anyone before and this was his first time. He did not know how to express the feelings in his heart, but he knew that he was willing to let the entire world know who the person he loved was, because she was his pride. Luo Qingchen looked at his somewhat confused eyes and her lips unconsciously curled into a faint smile. If she had Feng Qianchei by her side in this life, she would be very happy. Thinking of this, she quickly moved closer to him and lightly touched his slightly red lips. Then she said, "You're very good." Chapter 2055. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed her waist and kissed her. Feng Qianchei felt that he had suddenly become very strange. He really liked the feeling of kissing her, and the moment he touched her pink lips, his heart began to wildly beat. He wanted to kiss her whenever he looked at her and was constantly suppressing his emotions. But when she took the initiative, he could not hold back at all. This kiss was gentle, lingering, and scorching. He was very clear that the person in front of him would be the only love of his life, and no one could change that. In the bustling Chang and city, everything was the same as before. This was the first time Luo Qingchen had seen Chang, and after coming to this world. It was the same as the original owner's memories, and it was very lively. Feng Qianchei's carriage went through a small path and arrived at the Eastern Palace. The Eastern Palace was not inside the Imperial Palace, but in another palace not far from the Imperial Palace. "Greetings to your Highness the Crown Prince." As soon as they came in, an orderly voice rang out. He gave a soft unsound and then said to the housekeeper, "Bring this girl to the Linhua Hall. Take a trip out of the palace and buy all the clothes in the embroidery workshop." "Yes." The housekeeper looked at Luo Qingchen and respectfully nodded. "Choose 4 clever servants to take care of this young lady while she washes up. Have the kitchen prepare a banquet and bring it directly to the Linhua Hall." "Yes." Feng Qianchei explained everything in detail, making everyone in the Eastern Palace look at Luo Qingchen. Although this girl was wearing men's clothes and did not wear any makeup, it could not hide her beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. Every movement she made had a special aura. As soon as his voice fell, he turned to look at Luo Qingchen and said, "I want to take a trip into the palace. Although I did my best to keep it a secret at the Snow Peak Mountain, Royal Father should know. Since 9th brother has the ability to assassinate me, you should bear the consequences. I'll wait for you here." Luo Qingchen gave a soft laugh and said, "Come back early. I just saw that Chang'an street was filled with lanterns. Today seems to be the Mid-Autumn Festival." "Okay." He dragged out the word and gently patted her head. "Eat well and don't make me think about you, even though I'll definitely miss you." Hearing Feng Qianchei's words, she felt her face turn red again. She lowered her head in embarrassment and touched her ear. The surrounding servants all had shocked expressions on their faces, but the surrounding guards all had indifferent expressions on their faces. These days, listening to Feng Qianchei's gentle and doting voice, they were probably already used to it. In fact, their master wasn't a block of ice. It was just that he hadn't met anyone who could make him smile all these years. Now that they had met, he was no longer the cold and aloof crown prince. After taking a bath, the 4 maidservants each held a row of clothes and stood outside the curtain, looking at her with smiles on their faces. "Miss, these are the ready-made clothes that we brought from splendid embroidery workshop today. Miss, you can choose one to wear." His Highness the Crown Prince has already gone to the clothing workshop in the palace to order brocade from the palace. It will be delivered in a few days. Luo Qingchen looked at the multicolored silk and satin in their hands and finally chose a moon-white dress. The original owner loved dark-colored clothes when she was alive. She always felt that Rong Mu Ling could see her like this. At least if he saw her, she would be satisfied. She didn't know that if a person didn't have you in their heart, then they wouldn't have you in their eyes. When she appeared in Feng Qianchei's life, she was so down and out, but now she was a treasure in his hands. Chapter 2056. Luo Qingchen let go of the original owner's hair, and sat in front of the bronze mirror with the hazy hibiscus hairstyle that young girls love. She only had light makeup on, and it was not like the original owner's heavy makeup. However, it wasn't as disheveled as she was later on. Perhaps this was the effect of her light makeup. "Miss is truly beautiful. This servant has never seen such a beautiful girl in my life." That's right. Our crown prince has good eyes. Either he doesn't find a girl as a companion or he finds a beauty that can topple cities." The maidservants praised her one after another. Although it was mostly flattery, she sounded very happy. In the evening, Feng Qianchei returned as promised. The trace of worry on her face had disappeared. It seemed like the matter of the Qing Sin temple assassination had already been taken care of. Just as he came in, he saw Luo Qingchen standing in the back garden, looking at the peach blossoms in a daze. Although her face was faint, it still made him lose his mind. He saw that she was wearing a moon-white robe with lotus-root silk satin and a pair of cloud-embroidered shoes on her feet. Her long hair had a peach blossom hairpin in it, and at her waist was the acacia bell that he had given her. The night wind blew and the acacia bell at her waist jingled, creating a clear and pleasant sound. Luo Qingchen felt that someone was looking at her. The moment she turned around, she met his deep as ink eyes. "I'm back." His lips curled into a smile as he slowly walked in her direction. He gently picked up the peach blossom petals on her head and asked, "Why are you looking at these flowers so infatuated?" "I'll tell you a story." Luo Qingchen looked up and a trace of sadness flashed in her eyes. That sadness did not come from her, but rather from the original owner. At this moment, she was standing in the back garden of the Eastern Palace. When she closed her eyes, she could still see the original owners 3 years in the wrong manner. Every scene, every blade of grass, every tree, they were all clear. Actually, it was not that she wanted to think about it, but the original owner's obsession was too deep. She could more or less understand her obsession. 3 years, 1,095 days and nights. It was not easy for her to endure it alone. But Rong Mu Ling had never seen her forbearance, her loneliness, or even the slightest bit of goodness in her. "Looking at your expression, I can roughly guess that this should be a tragic story." Feng Qianche rubbed her head and said, "There's no rush. I came back especially to have dinner with you. You can take your time to tell me." The Crown Prince's Eastern Palace was a place of honor, so the dinner was naturally sumptuous. As she ate the fish and meat, she told the story of the garden full of pear blossoms in a relaxed tone. Feng Qianche listened carefully and his deep eyes flickered. He narrowed his eyes and asked her, "Are you jealous?" Luo Qingchen thought for a moment and stuffed the osmanthus cake in her mouth. She looked at him and said, "I envy you." With this answer, she spoke the thoughts of the original owner. Those were the deepest obsessions hidden in the depths of her heart. Back then, she had really wanted to see a garden full of peach blossoms. But she knew that for this kind of scene to appear in her dreams, it was a kind of luxury. "Fool!" He gave a soft laugh, and a faint gentleness appeared in his eyes as he said, "It's just a story, there's no need to be so sad." "I'm not sad. How can you see that I'm sad?" Luo Qingchen shook her head and said, "I just feel that it's not worth it for that girl." Chapter 2057. After dinner, Feng Qianche washed up and changed into another set of ivory-white robes. A white jade pendant hung from his waist. When he waved his fan, he looked like an elegant young scholar and not the high and mighty crown prince. "Our family's crown prince really is good-looking." Luo Qingchen gave a soft laugh. The corners of her lips slightly rose, revealing a sweet smile. "Bringing you to see the lanterns really makes your mouth sweet." He gave a soft laugh and held her hand as he said, "I still remember you saying that I was the best looking before." A what? She did not remember all the nice things she said, but she remembered everything related to Rong Mu Ling so clearly. "Aya." She pursed her lips and said with a soft laugh, "I was still young and didn't know anything back then. I also didn't like myself at that time. Not only was I childish, my eyes were also bad." Feng Qianche heard Luo Qingchen's forced explanation and helplessly shook his head with a smile. "The crown prince seems to be very dissatisfied with me." Luo Qingchen gave a slight nod and pretended to look at him with a proud expression. I don't dare." His gaze was gentle. When he walked out of the crown prince's Eastern Palace, he softly muttered, "Whatever you want, you will have it." He did not know when it started, but the things she liked had become the center of his life and the goal he constantly worked toward. She wanted to see the lanterns. Even if his father asked him to stay for dinner, he still wanted to come back. Perhaps it could not be said that he missed her that much after not seeing her for a few hours, but his heart had always been concerned. The streets were long and the lanterns were messy. Looking back at the lanterns, today was probably the most lively day in Chang, a city outside of New Year's. On the streets, almost everyone was holding a lantern. By the river, there were lotus lanterns floating in the air. In the sky, there were sky lanterns one after another. Let's also go right about sky lanterns. Luo Qingchen pulled his hand through the large streets and small alleys, walking to the side of a vendor selling sky lanterns. Feng Qianche lowered his head and gave a soft laugh. The feeling of being led around by her made his heart feel especially warm. Turned out that the feeling of having someone by your side was this good. Grand Prince, pay up. Luo Qingchen chuckled and picked up the brush on the table. She looked at him and said, "Let's each write on one side. We can't peek when we write." "All right," Feng Qianche softly responded. She thought for a long time and did not put her pen to paper. As for Luo Qingchen, she had already filled her side of the sky lantern. "You took so long to write a wish." Luo Qingchen tilted her head and looked at him. "Could it be that all your wishes have come true?" He turned the end of the brush and gently knocked on her head. "You're not allowed to peek. Flowers bloom in my dream, waiting for you to come, holding your hand, staying with you." This was the last line of words that Feng Qianche wrote on the Kongming lantern. Luo Qingchen stole a glance and a smile that was hard to hide rose from the corner of her mouth. It was probably because of this sentence that she chose the completely unbelievable option when she made a choice later on. The Kongming lantern rose slowly. Feng Qianche narrowed his eyes and saw her words clearly. She was confident and cute, but there was also a hint of arrogance in her words. "You will never meet a second Luo Qingchen in your life. Please treat her well." When they saw each other's words, they looked at each other and smiled. She was against the light and her white cheeks had a faint blush as she looked at him with a sweet smile. And this scene was coincidentally seen by Rong Mu Ling, who was drinking wine not far away. Chapter 2058. Qingchen. His lips were thin as he muttered her name, his eyes filled with disbelief. No, impossible. The Luo family was still searching for her around the lake. If she was still alive, how could she not return home? Rong Mu Ling rubbed his eyes. The young girl wearing a moon-white dress had her back to him. In front of her stood a very familiar face, but due to his hangover, he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. She was wearing a white robe and had a graceful bearing. She had a faint smile on her face and was as graceful as a startled swan. Why was it that when he saw this scene, his heart suddenly jerked and he felt like he couldn't breathe? Everything around him was a blur and the only thing that was clear was the woman in the white robe. No, it definitely wasn't her. His heart kept denying this answer, and a terrifying thought even appeared in his mind. Perhaps she really was dead and he only felt guilt towards her, but he wouldn't feel this kind of suffocating feeling. Rong Mu Ling took a deep breath and quickly passed through the crowd while muttering to himself. She never liked the color white and she wouldn't come out for some lantern festival. She doesn't know how to be Lan Lingqian. She would never act coquettishly and wouldn't stick to him and have him bring her to the lantern festival. Actually, Rong Mu Ling's thoughts were not wrong. The previous host had joined the Rong family for 3 years and almost never left the house. There were even some people who didn't know what the Rong family's first wife looked like. For them, their impression of Lan Lingqian was deeper. Because every time the court hosted a banquet in the palace, he would bring Lan Lingqian with him. Whether it was his friends or relatives, everyone seemed to have forgotten about the Rong family's first wife. In Rong Mu Ling's eyes, he only had one wife and that was Lan Lingqian. In the crowd, he desperately ran in the direction of his memories, but when he arrived in front of the lantern stall, it was another unfamiliar face. "Qingchen," he gasped and grabbed the white-robed girl's wrist. But when he turned around, it was not the person he had seen before. "Who are you? Crazy! Don't touch my wife. You reek of alcohol. Wife, let's go." They seemed to be an ordinary couple. Could it be that he was mistaken? Perhaps he was mistaken. They had been married for 3 years, but he had never seen her smile like that before. It was so pure and carefree. "Boss, did a woman in white come here to buy a lantern just now? She's about this tall, and there's also a handsome man standing beside her. The owner glanced at him and sized him up before saying, "Drunkard! Go away, go away. Don't interfere with my business." Rong Mu Ling only needed a glance to see that the boss was thinking for a moment. He took out a bag of silver and said, "I'll buy all of your Kongming lanterns. Answer my question." He narrowed his eyes and looked at the peddler with an aura that ordinary people did not have. The boss weighed the purse in his hand, and his expression changed instantly. "Master." So it was this master. This little one really had eyes but did not recognize Mt. Tai. Just now, there was a heaven-shaking couple that came to buy Kongming lanterns. After they bought them, they went towards the river bank. "Thank you." Rong Mu Ling responded and quickly ran towards the river bank. Along the way, his heart was almost in his throat. A heaven-shaking appearance. Could it really be Luo Qingchen? Chapter 2059. It was probably because of the Mid-Autumn Festival that there were many more people releasing river lanterns than sky lanterns. Luo Qingchen held candied hawthorn in her left hand and cotton candy in her right hand. Her mouth did not stop moving the entire way. It was probably because she had been starving for the past 2 days, causing her to feel hungry even after eating a lot for dinner. Feng Qianche followed behind her, creating a safe zone around her. As long as a man deliberately wanted to pass by her, he would immediately turn around with a single look. He did not know where his deterrence came from. Perhaps it was the Crown Prince's innate ability. In short, as long as he glared at someone, not a single person dared to approach them. Until he saw Rong Mu Ling's figure. They were on the stone bridge, and he was on the opposite side of the river where the lanterns were. There was a bit of panic in his eyes, as if he was looking for something, constantly pacing back and forth. Feng Qianche narrowed his eyes and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Qing Qing." He softly called out to Luo Qingchen. Then he raised his right hand and grabbed her delicate wrist, bringing her into his embrace. His left hand touched her face, turning her back to the opposite side of the river. In the next second, he unhesitatingly kissed her deeply on the lips on this stone bridge filled with people coming and going. The sweetness of hawthorn mixed with cotton candy mixed in her mouth. Luo Qingchen's brain almost completely stopped working at this moment. She did not even respond, allowing Feng Qianche to kiss her as she tossed and turned. After a round of jeering and booing, there was an instant of warm palms. While Feng Qianche kissed her, he did not forget to slightly open his eyes and look in the opposite direction of the river. That man wearing a black robe seemed to be looking in his direction. His brows furrowed for a long time before he slowly relaxed and left in the other direction. At this moment, Rong Mu Ling already had an answer in his heart. That person could not be Luo Qingchen. Even if he felt that it was her for a moment, when he saw the man and woman on the stone bridge kiss each other to death, he was certain that it was not her. In his eyes, Luo Qingchen would never do such a thing. She was the daughter of a noble family, and in the 3 years that she had been married to him, she had been virtuous and conservative. It was impossible for her to kiss a man in front of everyone. Moreover, he clearly knew in his heart, she loved him. However, her love had always been coldly blocked outside the door by him. Until Lan Lingqian's miscarriage, he personally shattered her love and all her dreams. In the end, he had let her down. On this mid-autumn night, a bright moon hung in the sky. To Rong Mu Ling, this was a sleepless night. She was drowning in her drunkenness as she recalled the scene when they first met. It seemed to be autumn, and the ground was covered with yellow flowers and maple leaves. Her gaze fell only on the peach blossom tree. The moment she raised her eyes were incomparably clear. But at that time, Luo Qingchen was just a pretty girl to him. He already had Lan Lingqian in his heart, but there was no room for anyone else. But his arrogance still existed. At that time, the sons of the other 2 ministers waved their swords in front of her to show off. The proud him landed on the ground with Qin Gong and pulled out the sword at his waist, performing another set of drunken mortal dust. The peach blossom tree gently shook and several peach blossom petals flew in the air with his sword. Chapter 2060. At the same time, on the stone bridge, Feng Qianche saw that Rong Mu Ling, who was on the other side of the river, had already walked far away. Finally, he gave Luo Qingchen a deep kiss before gently letting her go. After a few seconds, her originally snow-white cheeks instantly turned red, and she angrily looked at him. "You... what are you doing?" Heavens! In front of everyone, surrounded by bright lanterns, he still recklessly kissed her on the stone bridge. This plane was too open. Host, a modern person, actually said that an ancient person was open. You scared me to death. I thought my mission was complete. The time is not right. Not right, your sister. It's already like this and it's still not right. Also, this treasure is not a modern person, this treasure is a space-time person. Or you can call me a space-time person. Because I want to tell the whole world that you belong to me, Feng Qianche alone. His expression was very serious and his gaze was very focused. There seemed to be a kind of possessive light in his eyes. Layer upon layer, it made people unable to see clearly. Why do I feel like you've met a love rival? Luo Qingchen looked at his somewhat jealous expression and felt that it was strange. After all, there were no other men by her side. As for her identity, Feng Qianche should not know. However, she had to find a time to properly tell him the whole story. Perhaps. Feng Qianche hooked his lips into a smile and looked at her with a doting gaze. In the past, the teacher told me that once one falls into the river of love, one will become jealous. I should be at this stage right now. Luo Qingchen thought in her heart. You should be at the stage of flirting and whispering sweet nothings. When they returned to the Eastern Palace, it was already very late. Feng Qianche did not immediately return to the Linhua Hall, but headed to the prison in the Eastern Palace. Luo Qingchen suddenly remembered that Dong Liang was still locked inside. She did not know what kind of punishment that delicate youth would receive. Death, perhaps it was impossible to escape. However, whether it was a pleasant or painful death depended on Feng Qianche's thoughts. Moreover, assassinating the crown prince was a crime punishable by 9 familial exterminations. Luo Qingchen, who was sitting in the Linhua Hall, originally planned to wait for Feng Qianche to return. Little did she know that she would fall asleep while waiting. After all, it had been a long time since she had a good night's sleep. The next morning, when she woke up, she found that she had moved from the soft couch in the hall to the large bed in the inner hall. However, there was no sign of Feng Qianche beside her. Hearing the sound of her waking up, the 4 quick-witted maidservants came in one after another with towels, wash-basins, clothes, and other things to wash up and wear. "Miss, breakfast is ready for you." One of the maidservants obediently smiled and said, "The Crown Prince told this servant to wait for Miss to wake up and tell Miss that he won't be eating with you today, but Miss must eat breakfast." Luo Qingchen slightly knit her brows when she heard this. This sentence could be expressed clearly with just a few words, but after adding some honorifics and muttering to himself, it became a little awkward. Especially this servant girl. This servant girl is really too troublesome. "What is your name?" Luo Qingchen waved her hand and took the towel to wash her face. "Put down your things and go about your business." Chapter 2061. When Luo Qingchen heard Hong Er's words, she was a little frightened. So Feng Qianche was such a violent person. Why did she not feel it? Other than the initial coldness, what she felt the most was his gentleness and pampering. "Your family's crown prince is so violent." Little did she know that Luo Qingchen's conclusion would cause the 4 servant girls' faces to turn white, and they all knelt down. They said in unison, "Miss, please spare us. This servant spoke wrongly and this servant deserves to die." Cuckoo. Luo Qingchen was stunned for a moment before clearing her throat and saying, "Is your family's crown prince usually very fierce?" The 4 of them heard this and looked at each other in dismay. Then Hong Er slowly said, replying to Miss, "It is not the Crown Prince who is fierce, but rather the housekeeper pursues rules and restrictions. You can all rise." Luo Qingchen shrugged and said with a faint smile, "Your housekeeper's words are not wrong. In the palace, trouble comes from the mouth. Speak less and do more, and you will not make a mistake." "Yes, miss." "That's right. What did your family's crown prince do in the morning?" Luo Qingchen asked while putting on her clothes. Replying to Miss, "Tomorrow is the crown prince's birthday." In the past, the crown prince's birthday was always organized by the empress in the palace. Hong Er obediently replied, "Although all the civil and military officials are gathered, the crown prince has never appeared." "What?" Luo Qingchen was stunned for a moment before saying, "Tomorrow is his birthday?" Feng Qianche had never mentioned this to her. If Hong Er did not mention it, wouldn't she not even know his birthday? "That's right. But your family's crown prince is very arrogant, not appearing at all." Luo Qingchen's brows slightly trembled as she said, "Then why is he busy with his birthday this year?" In truth, she could understand why Feng Qianche was not willing to celebrate his birthday. After all, his mother, Ling Long, had left the world after accompanying him for a year. For him, this kind of birthday would only increase his sorrow. Perhaps, but it was nothing. His Highness the Crown Prince said that this year's birthday banquet will be held in the Eastern Palace. I understand." After breakfast, Luo Qingchen found an excuse to leave through the back door of the Eastern Palace. Actually, she knew that Feng Qianche's personal bodyguard had been following her the entire time, and her every move had been under his eyes. But it didn't matter. She just wanted to buy him a birthday present. After all, it didn't seem right to celebrate his first birthday empty-handed. Walking around the market on Chang'an Street, she didn't see anything good until she saw a Persian man with strange facial features selling a dazzling array of beads. She stopped. "Miss, take a look, these are definitely top-notch treasures." Luo Qingchen stood in front of the stall for a long time before she slowly picked up the transparent bead that was mixed among the colorful beads. Although she didn't have the ability to appraise treasures, this bead felt incomparably cool when it was placed on her palm. Against the light there was a penetrating feeling. If she guessed correctly, it should be the night luminescent pearl. "I want this bead." Luo Qingchen gave a soft laugh, feeling very satisfied. For something like the night luminescent pearl, in this kind of world, it was something that could only be found by chance. She returned to the Eastern Palace. When she opened the back door, a familiar figure appeared in front of her. Chapter 2062. Feng. "Master, you scared me to death." Luo Qingchen bit her lips and said, "How did you come back so quickly? I wasn't here in the morning, and you slipped out of the Eastern Palace. How could I not worry?" His brows slightly knit and he was a little angry. Now, although Dong Liang's matter had completely extinguished the Ninth Prince's arrogance, there were still remnants of his influence. Perhaps the people in the court and harem did not know her, but the people on the Ninth Prince's side were very clear about Luo Qingchen's position in his heart. Whenever he thought about how those cruel people could harm her, if she was not by his side, his heart would not be able to calm down. There were some things that he was not in a rush to have, but now he was eager to have them. "Don't blame me first." Luo Qingchen pursed her lips and her eyes sparkled as she looked at him and said, "I'm going to buy you a gift." Hearing the word gift, Feng Qianche's expression froze. He then raised his eyebrows and said, "It seems that the Eastern Palace's rules are not strict enough for the maidservants to speak without restraint." Luo Qingchen heard this and quickly walked forward to grab his arm. She said with a sweet smile, "Aya, you don't know, but those maidservants are scared of you. They would kneel and beg for mercy at the slightest thing. Why don't you have any tender feelings for the fairer sex? It's enough to have you." He narrowed his eyes and his expression was still very serious, but when he looked at her, his tone could not help but be gentle. Feng Qianche probably never thought that he would become like this. Because of a girl, his emotions would be affected like this. All right. She accepted his words of love and said with a faint smile, for the sake of the crown prince, Jiang 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 Jiang. She took out a transparent bead from her sleeve and handed it to him. How is it? It's pretty, right? Feng Qianche looked at the gift she gave him and his heart was filled with joy. On the surface, he pretended to be cold because of her running out of the palace and said, "Do you believe that Lin Hall can find 10 identical beads like this?" "You," Luo Qingchen angrily said in a fit of anger, "then give it back to me. There's no reason to return what you've given away." Feng Qianche saw that she was reaching out to take the bead and hurriedly used her height advantage to raise my arm that was holding the bead to a place where she couldn't reach. Luo Qingchen put her hands on her hips and looked at him angrily. "This is called a night pearl. It will shine at night. In the future, even if I'm not around and there's no one to light the lamp for you, it can still light up your Lin Hua Palace Hall." Before he finished speaking, he reached out with his right hand and pulled her into his embrace. He raised his eyebrows and said, "I won't allow you to say that. You won't be gone. You will always be by my side." He didn't know why, but when he heard these words, he always felt inexplicably uneasy. He didn't like to hear it. He didn't like to hear it at all. Luo Qingchen saw his nervous expression and the way he hugged her tightly. Suddenly, she felt that she had said something wrong. Perhaps, even though Feng Qianche was a little cold and sometimes violent, but to him, she was his weakness, a weakness that no one could touch. "I was just saying," she whispered in his arms, "I was just talking about the use of the night luminescent pearl. I like it a lot." He gently rubbed her head and replied, "I will treat it like a treasure and keep it by my side because this is a gift from you. I will be like the night pearl. I will always be by your side." She slightly nodded and her beautiful eyes curved like crescent moons. "Okay?" Chapter 2063. The next day, Luo Qingchen slept until noon before getting out of bed. It was probably because Feng Qianche had given her a calming incense last night that she slept exceptionally well. She did not wake up until the next day. Hong prepared the clothes for her and opened the wooden window. A cool breeze blew and a few light pink flower petals fell into the room. The air was filled with the faint fragrance of peach blossoms. How can there be peach blossoms in this weather? Luo Qingchen's brows slightly knit and a faint trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. Logically speaking, in this kind of deep winter season, there should be wintersweet blossoms. "Miss, today is Master's birthday. He specially ordered people to go to the peach forest 10 li away and transplant several peach trees." Hong said with a soft smile, "This servant will help Miss get dressed and we can head to the front hall." "All right." Luo Qingchen gently nodded and her mind was filled with thoughts. Could it be that Feng Qianche had specially transplanted the peach blossoms because of her story? No, that shouldn't be possible. After he finished listening to the story, he pretended to shake his head and sighed. A story is a story and has no relation to reality. Feng Qianche should not know that this story was related to her. Peach blossoms, it should be a coincidence. Sitting in front of the bronze mirror, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were filled with hope and she had a faint smile. The original owner was truly a beauty. With the hair of a young girl, she looked like a 16 or 17-year-old little girl. She did not look like a girl who had been married for 3 years. She also felt a bit of pity for her. After all, 3 years of her youth was given to a man who did not love her. Feng Qianche's birthday banquet began at noon and there was an endless stream of people entering the Eastern Palace. Feng Qianche, who did not like crowds, seemed to have invited all the influential people in the court and inner court. This included the Minister of Revenue, Rong Sen, and his son, Rong Mu-ling. At the same time, in the Rong Manor, Rong Mu-ling had not slept all night and with a hangover, he looked very weak. His father, Rong Sen, also looked a bit old. It was probably because too many things had happened during this time. After the Luo family's daughter committed suicide by jumping into the lake, there was no trace of her. The decades of friendship between the two families had been severed. Coupled with the exposure of the assassination attempt on the Crown Prince, the forces supporting the Ninth Prince were weakened by more than half. Even if the Ninth Prince was lucky enough to get away from this matter, the Phoenix Emperor still issued a decree to put him under house arrest in the residence. The Rong family had suffered 2 storms in a row. In addition, they were not the Crown Prince's people, so they never thought that they would be invited to the Crown Prince's birthday. Therefore, Rong Sun was overjoyed when he accepted the invitation. This might be the best opportunity for him to win over the Crown Prince. Moreover, the Crown Prince had specially sent out 2 invitations. One was signed by him, and the other was signed by his son, Rong Muling. In his eyes, it was clear that the Crown Prince was willing to let bygones be bygones and give them a chance. Now that the Rong family was at the heart of the struggle, they had to seize this opportunity. Today is the Crown Prince's birthday. Quickly tidy up and follow father into the Eastern Palace. Rong Sun glanced at Rong Muling, his eyes filled with dissatisfaction. Crown Prince. Rong Muling narrowed his eyes and a trace of confusion flashed through his eyes. Our family has never had any contact with the Crown Prince. In the past, when he held banquets in the palace, he never invited us. Why would he invite us to the Eastern Palace this year? Because the Rong family supported the Ninth Prince, he was very confused about the Crown Prince's invitation. Chapter 2064. Perhaps the Crown Prince feels that our Rong family still has value. Rong Sun looked at him and said, "Perhaps it's because he appreciates your talent. After all, he even wrote your name on the invitation this time. He has good eyes." Rong Muling smiled and a bit of pride flashed in his eyes as he said, "Allow me to wash up and accompany you into the Eastern Palace." Rong Muling did not know much about His Highness the Crown Prince. He only knew that he was cold and proud and did things ruthlessly and decisively. For the assassination this time, everyone thought that he would at least act forgiving to deal with Dong Liang's matter, but they never thought that he would execute him on the spot that night. Everyone from the Dong family was chased out of Chang'an and not allowed to take a single step into the city. 5 years of relationship as master and servant, he did not forgive them at all. But for this, Rong Muling actually admired Feng Qianche. There was no need to forgive people who betrayed him. He chose a long blue robe and entered the palace with his father Rong senator to him. He could roughly guess why the Crown Prince had sent him an invitation. It was nothing more than his talent and ability. Although he was born into an official's family, he had once been the top scholar and added glory to the Rong family. Along the way, Rong Sun did not forget to remind him that if His Highness the Crown Prince appreciated him, he should not be too proud. They no longer had the capital to squander. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. "Father, he wants to use me because of my talent and ability," Rong Muling said with an indifferent expression, "and whether I'm willing to be used by him or not depends on whether he has the qualifications." From the day he was born, Rong Muling felt that there was no one smarter and more outstanding than him in this world. He had spent too much time on the matter of love, but unfortunately, he had lost completely. The woman he had always loved yearned for the imperial palace. It must be because there was someone in the palace that she missed. As for who it was, in the imperial palace there were 2 men with the most power. One was the Phoenix Emperor and the other was the Crown Prince. He did not think that Lan Lingqian would fall in love with the Phoenix Emperor, so it could only be Feng Qianche. Entering the Eastern Palace this time, he held on to a sliver of hope. Perhaps only by going there would he be able to see Lan Lingqian's figure. He was not going to redeem her, but to bid her farewell. He had done what he should have done, what he shouldn't have done, what he could and couldn't do. Lan Lingqian did not love him. She did not love him at all. As long as Lan Lingqian loved him even a little, she would not use their unborn child to achieve her own goals. No, to her, it was not their unborn child at all. It was a tool to complete a mission. Perhaps, at this time, his love for Lan Lingqian had already turned into bubbles after being hurt again and again. All that was left was hatred and unwillingness, and the person he felt most sorry for in his life was Luo Qingchen. If he could see her again in this life, the thing he wanted to do most was to apologize to her and then take back that resolute divorce letter. If he couldn't, he would devote his entire life's energy to fulfilling his ambition and remain single for the rest of his life. Don't think that way. Rong Sun saw his carefree look and hurriedly said, His Highness the Crown Prince's temperament is completely different from Zhu Wangye's. He is definitely someone who cannot be offended. Chapter 2065. Because today was the Crown Prince's birthday banquet, the streets of Chang and city were especially crowded. After walking and stopping for a long time, they finally arrived at the Crown Prince's eastern palace. At this time, it was already evening. The setting sun shined brightly above the eastern palace. Looking from afar, it was especially beautiful. Today's banquet was especially grand. From noon onwards, there would be singing and dancing. Groups of distinguished guests arrived one after another, presented their generous gifts, sat down at the banquet, and chatted merrily. Of course, on this important day, even if there was no invitation, there was one person who would appear. That was Lan Lingqian. She began to dress up early in the morning, planning to enter the palace with the Empress. Your Highness, do you think my dress is all right? Lan Lingqian was clearly a bit nervous, and her eyes trembled slightly. She had been preparing for Feng Qianchei's birthday since 3 months ago. 3 years ago, the graceful rainbow dress did not leave an impression in the eyes of the Crown Prince. This year, she must use all her strength to perform a dance on his birthday. It looks good. The Empress nodded and her eyes were amiable. She actually liked Lan Lingqian. In these 3 years, this girl went from a little girl who did not know anything to someone who could pick up a dagger and stab the heart of an enemy. It was all for Feng Qianchei. She wanted to stay by his side and become his crown princess. Therefore, she obeyed the Empress's words. If this kind of girl stood by Feng Qianchei's side in the future, no matter what difficulties they encountered, she would definitely stand behind him and betray the world. This was the reason why she, as the Empress, liked Lan Lingqian. Therefore, even if Feng Qianchei did not invite Lan Lingqian this time, she still used the name of a dance class to arrange for her to enter. I don't know if the Crown Prince will remember me this time. Lan Lingqian's face was a bit worried. She pursed her lips and said, Recently, I heard some news from the Eastern Palace. When the Crown Prince returned from Snow Peak Mountain, he brought a girl with him. The Empress heard this and her brows slightly knit. She then nodded and said, There is indeed such a thing. But I'm not too sure who it is. Perhaps it's a Taoist nun from Qingxin Temple. His Highness the Crown Prince never mentioned it to the public, so no one knows. Lan Lingqian heaved a sigh of relief after hearing the Empress' words. This time, the Crown Prince was going to the Snow Peak Mountain to pay respects to his mother. It was impossible for him to go with a woman. Then, in such a desolate snowy mountain, the woman who could be brought back was most likely a Taoist nun. Perhaps it was because 9th Wangye's matter was not over yet, so Feng Qianchei brought the Taoist nun back. I'm relieved to hear that. Lan Lingqian chuckled and asked, Nyang, when are we leaving? I can't wait to perform. Today, she was going to take back the regret of not being able to enter her life that year. She believed that the dance she had prepared for so long would definitely amaze the audience. Today's spotlight was definitely hers. At the same time, in the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace, Luo Qingchen waited for several hours in Linhua Hall. The reason was because Feng Qianchei said that a set of clothes would be delivered in the evening. She had to wait in the hall and change before going to the banquet. Chapter 2066. When she saw the clothes, Luo Qingchen was actually a little surprised because they looked like banquet clothes. In other words, these were the clothes that the main character would wear at a grand banquet. Wow, so beautiful! When Hong-er held it in her hands, she couldn't help but exclaim, "This is the first time this servant has seen such clothes." "That's what you said when you saw me." Luo Qingchen rolled her eyes at her and said, "So in Hong-er's eyes, I'm no different from clothes." "Miss, please spare me. Hong-er didn't mean that." In the next second, the little girl immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times. Luo Qingchen hurriedly supported her and sighed, "The maidservants of the Eastern Palace can't joke at all." "Miss, don't say any more." Luo Qingchen chuckled and said, "Help me change. This dress should be quite complicated to wear." After a quarter of an hour, Luo Qingchen put on this simple yet elegant dress. Why was it called simple and elegant? Because it was ivory white in color. Why was it elegant? Because the embroidery on it was a phoenix and there were many luxurious accessories. After putting it on, Luo Qingchen looked at the bronze mirror. It had to be said that clothes made the person. Even she felt that her appearance had increased by a level. Wow! It's really beautiful. Hong-er looked at Luo Qingchen in the bronze mirror, and couldn't help but sigh again. Luo Qingchen chuckled and teased, "Last time, Hong-er used roughly the same words to praise a dress." See, Hong-er consciously sucked in a breath of cold air and was about to say the same words. Luo Qingchen quickly interrupted her and said, I'll spare you, the sun was setting in the west. At this moment, most of the guests invited to the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace had already arrived. Feng Qianche sat on the high platform with a faint smile on his lips. This year's birthday was definitely going to be the most special birthday of his life, because he wanted to announce something at his birthday party, and he wanted to tell someone that the girl was his, and that she had nothing to do with anyone else. He would fulfill all her wishes, no matter what it was. Not only did he have to do it, he had to do it in front of everyone. He was wearing an ivory robe embroidered with elegant bamboo leaf patterns and snow-white dragons, which complemented the sheep-fat jade hairpin on his head. It was just that there was something that flashed in her eyes that people couldn't catch, but they wanted to peek. Unknowingly, people were already attracted to her. "Congratulations to Your Highness the Crown Prince for a happy birthday." Everyone raised their cups to congratulate him. His deep eyes exuded a light that was different from normal people, and this gaze landed on no one else but Rong Mu Ling. This was the first time he had examined a man like this, looking at him with an air of superiority. Rong Mu Ling naturally received such a gaze and felt an indescribable pressure in his heart. He felt that Feng Qianche's gaze wasn't one of admiration, but rather a provocation. A provocation that came from an enemy, and it was enough to completely suppress him with the aura of a king. Feng Qianche picked up a cup of wine from the table and narrowed his eyes as he looked in Rong Mu Ling's direction. Then, he drank it all in one gulp. This kind of toast seemed to be a final salute to his opponent. Chapter 2067. At the same time, Rong Mu Ling also slowly picked up his wine cup and downed it in one gulp. He didn't know what he was doing, but he felt an inexplicable discomfort in his heart. "Father, maybe Uncle Luo just didn't come." Rong Mu Ling slowly retracted his gaze and said, "After all, Qingchen hasn't been found yet." No. Rong Sin shook his head with certainty and said, "How could I not know what kind of person Luo Lin is? His daughter is important to him, but the Luo family is also important to him. If the Crown Prince invites him, he will definitely come. After all, the 9th Prince's matter was more or less related to him. Now, he had such a perfect excuse to join the other side. Whether it was the Rong family or the Luo family, it was an extremely good opportunity. Perhaps. Rong Mu Ling faintly replied and didn't say anything else. In the next second, let us enjoy a beautiful dance performance. Butterfly Spirit Dance. The melodious guzheng slowly sounded and Lan Lingqian was dressed in a blue dance dress, as she walked up the stage with light step. The few women standing beside her were all dancers who served as a foil for her. She was like a blue butterfly dancing gracefully. Every time she glanced back, every time she smiled, she was so charming and flirtatious. Her lips were covered with a white veil, and when the night wind blew, the veil slowly fell to the ground. At the same time, Luo Qingchen appeared at the banquet's entrance. When she saw this scene, she immediately recognized Lan Lingqian. Actually, she could only be considered the second person, because the first person to recognize Lan Lingqian was none other than Rong Mu Ling, who was sitting in the banquet seat, was stunned as he looked at the girl standing in the center of the stage in disbelief. Her movements were charming and enchanting as she looked at Feng Qianche on stage with every frown and smile. As he watched, he laughed self-deprecatingly. Since he was young, he had known Lan Lingqian for so many years. He only knew that she could dance, but he didn't know that she could dance so well. It turned out that Lan Lingqian wasn't that cold, so she had never been warm to him. It was just that he wasn't the person she liked. And if she was the right person, she would do her best and do her best for him. For some reason, when Rong Mu Ling saw Lan Lingqian dance like this, after a self-deprecating smile, he felt relieved. From beginning to end, this was a dead end. Luo Qingchen loved him. He loved Lan Lingqian, and the person that Lan Lingqian loved was Crown Prince Feng Qianche. In that case, the most pitiful one was Luo Qingchen. The Rong estate waited bitterly and foolishly waited for him for 3 years, only to receive his cruel divorce letter. Thinking of this, Rong Mu Ling's heart froze for a moment, and he felt a slight pain. As far as Lan Lingqian was concerned, she only had eyes for Feng Qianche. From the beginning to the end, he was the only one. That year, if it wasn't for Feng Qianche, she would have died a long time ago. The moment she met him, she completely gave her heart to him. She couldn't give it to anyone else. At this moment, Lan Lingqian felt like she was a blue butterfly, constantly dancing and displaying her beauty. All the men sitting on both sides of the banquet were intoxicated, almost dancing with her. It could be said that only Feng Qianche's expression didn't change from beginning to end. His eyes seemed to have already skipped her and fixed on the woman in ivory-white clothes at the entrance of the banquet. She really was very beautiful. He wouldn't get tired of looking at her. Chapter 2068. At the end of the song, everyone's eyes fell on Lan Lingqian's body, and the audience burst into thunderous applause. However, there were a few people below the stage who couldn't bear to see such a charming dance, and began to whisper among themselves. Did you hear? This person is actually the Rong family's adopted daughter. Her thoughts are quite heavy. You should be a bit quieter. She is one of the Empress people. It's because she is one of the Empress people that no one can say anything. Otherwise, this kind of woman would have already been. The voices of the audience were a bit louder, and Lan Lingqian noticed it. She arrogantly glared at that person, and that person did not continue speaking. It really was a beautiful performance. Crown Prince, don't you think so? The Empress sat to the left and looked at Lan Lingqian with a smile. This one hasn't seen someone dance so well in a long time. It was as if I had seen a blue butterfly. It's good that the Empress likes it. Feng Qianche nodded. His eyes were cold, but there was a bit of respect. Seeing that Feng Qianche was not attracted by Lan Lingqian's dance, the Empress could not say anything else. She could only gently knit her brows and shake her head in Lan Lingqian's direction. This was her secret way of telling her not to say anything more. However, Lan Lingqian did not listen. She was clearly a bit anxious. After all, she had spent 3 months learning how to dance. If she was unable to enter Feng Qianche's eyes, then she might not have a chance. Does His Highness the Crown Prince like Ling Qian's performance? Her voice was filled with resentment, making her seem especially delicate. Feng Qianche narrowed his eyes, and there was a deep light in his eyes. Yes. He slowly stood up and walked forward. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Could it be that the woman who deliberately stood out could really obtain the Crown Prince's favor? At this moment, Even Lan Lingqian was stunned. She thought that the crown prince would only say something. She never thought that he would actually stand up and walk in her direction. At this moment, she felt as if her heart was about to jump out. So many years of hard work, so many years of patience, so many years of recklessness. It was all for this moment. The person he loved the most was slowly walking towards him. However, she guessed the beginning correctly, but not the end. Feng Qianche had indeed stood up and walked towards her, but he did not stop in front of her. Instead, he brushed past her and walked towards the banquet's main entrance. Everyone's gazes followed Feng Qianche's figure until they vaguely saw a devastatingly beautiful woman standing at the door. The woman was wearing an ivory-white brocade embroidered with flowers. Her long black hair was combed into a tasseled bun, with a golden begonia hairpin inserted diagonally on the top of her head. On her feet, she wore a pair of soft-soled shoes made of satin peacock thread. She narrowed her eyes, and the remaining light of the setting sun shone on her snow-white face. She was so beautiful that it was suffocating. For Luo Qingchen, there was an inexplicable nervousness in her heart. Uneasiness and panic filled her heart. This feeling didn't come from her, but from the original owner. Because at this banquet there was a man she loved the most, but also hated the most, Rong Mu Ling. When she stood at the door, she did not see Lan Lingqian dancing in the center of the stage, but rather Rong Mu Ling sitting to the left. He did not seem to have changed from her memories. He was still gentle, elegant, and elegant. Chapter 2069. She took a deep breath and did her best to suppress the pain from the previous owner. Actually, if it wasn't for this moment, she would never have known that the previous owner loved Rong Mu Ling so much. This kind of love, there were not many people who could do it in this time. What are you looking at? Why are you so engrossed? Feng Qianche was already standing in front of her at this time. Seeing her dazed expression, his heart sank a bit. Actually, he knew why she was so dazed. Although he didn't want to admit it, he would never back down. The person he loved, he would disregard everything to announce her identity to the world. I'm looking at a certain person's dance. Luo Qingchen gathered her emotions and seriously looked at him as she softly said, I don't know if this prince thinks it's good? Her faint smile swept away the haze in his heart. To him, as long as he looked at her face, his heart would feel strangely at ease. I wasn't paying attention. Feng Qianche lightly shook his head and said, I was looking at you and found that you were focused on looking. Luo Qingchen was stunned for a moment and felt strangely flustered. Little did she know that his lips would curl into a smile and he would only say one word, me. As soon as his voice fell, he slowly held her hand and walked towards the high seat. Along the way, countless gazes fell on her. There was shock, doubt, envy, jealousy. The two most dazzling gazes came from Rong Mu Ling and Lan Lingqian. They were completely in disbelief. That. Isn't that Qingchen? Rong Sen's mouth was wide open as his sparkling eyes stared at Luo Qingchen in her luxurious clothes. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. At this moment, Rong Mu Ling could feel his hands trembling uncontrollably. The sun was setting in the west and the night wind blew. The courtyard was filled with peach blossoms and the air was filled with the smell of peach blossoms. Was it her? Was it really her? But how was this possible? In just a few days, she had actually become someone by the crown prince's side. No, it couldn't be. There was something wrong with her gaze. Although her eyes were still as clear as water, when they swept across his face, they were as indifferent as dust, without any ripples of emotion. It was as if they had never known each other. Maybe it's just that they look alike. He could feel that when he said this, even his voice was unconsciously trembling. This was because he was increasingly inclined to believe that the woman in front of him was Luo Qingchen. Really too similar, apart from her worshipful eyes that had turned cold, there was no difference between her and Luo Qingchen, who had stayed in the Rong Manor for 3 years. Compared to Rong Mu Ling, Lan Lingqian's reaction was much greater. At first, she could not completely see Luo Qingqian's appearance. She only knew that there was a woman dressed in pure white standing not too far away, and Feng Qianqi was walking towards her. But when she got closer and closer, she felt like her heart was about to jump out of her chest. Luo! Luo! Before she could finish speaking, she immediately shook her head and said, "No, absolutely impossible. Didn't Luo Qingqian commit suicide by jumping into the lake? How could she appear here? Why was the crown prince looking at her with such a gentle gaze, as if he was looking at a treasure in the world?" She had never seen Feng Qianqi have this kind of gaze before. She did not believe it, she did not believe it, she did not believe it. She would rather die than believe it. But the things in this world did not exist just because she did not believe it. To Feng Qianqi, Luo Qingqian was his everything. Chapter 2070. From the banquet's entrance to the high seats, it was only a few short steps, but Luo Qingqian felt like it was as long as a century. Actually, she was panicking. At this banquet, there were too many people who had seen her before. Even if the original owner had joined the Rong Manor for 3 years and almost never left, as the daughter of a great scholar, her appearance would be remembered by many people. In this moment, she suddenly began to hate her identity. This kind of identity would not bring any benefits to Feng Qianqi and would instead make him look bad. After all, as long as one person recognized her, this banquet would become especially awkward. Luo Qingqian even wanted to pull back her left hand and calm down to think about the current situation. If it was for Feng Qianqi's good, before she had a new identity, it would be best if their actions were not too intimate. Otherwise, gossip would be fearful. Feng Qianqi, who was walking in front, seemed to feel that she wanted to pull back her hand. His brows slightly knit and his right hand that had been tightly holding her left hand suddenly let go. Luo Qingqian was stunned for a moment before she gently pulled back her hand. Her heart was somewhat disappointed, but she felt that this was what she had to do in this situation. Feng Qianqi could understand her meaning. If he did not understand, he would not have let go of her hand. Little did she know that in the next second, he suddenly turned around and grabbed her arm with his left hand. He pulled her into his embrace and took the opportunity to grab her waist. His right hand held her face, and after looking at her for a second, he did not hesitate to kiss her. See, everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. This scene could really be described with the word shocking. The crown prince, who had always been cold and indifferent, had actually kissed a girl in front of hundreds of officials. This kind of action was simply unprecedented. At this moment there was only one word that could describe Luo Qingqian, and that was stupefied. Her mind was completely blank and her hands were so nervous that they kept breaking out in cold sweat. Her breathing became even more hurried. But this kind of hurried breathing allowed Feng Qianqi to find an opening. His thin lips moved in for a deep kiss. "You!" Luo Qingqian wanted to say something but was blocked by Feng Qianqi's kiss. In just an instant, fine snow began to fall from the sky, accompanied by peach blossoms that filled the sky. It seemed so tranquil. Ding, affection has increased by 10. Mission completion rate is now 100%. After an unknown period of time, he slowly released her. At this time, the surroundings were still silent, and no one dared to say a word. When he slowly let go of her, her eyes couldn't help but turn red. She didn't know if she was touched, aggrieved, or some other emotion. In short, mixed together, it almost made her cry. How could Feng Qianqi be so overbearing, kissing her in front of everyone? How could Feng Qianqi be so good, not caring about his identity from beginning to end? She suddenly felt a little worried. If he knew that she had been married to someone else for 3 years, would he take back all the favorable impression points he had given her? After all, he was so proud. How could he allow his crown princess to marry someone else? Even if she knew that Rong Muling had never touched her before, others didn't know. How would they look at him? Paper could not wrap fire in the end. At this banquet, there were two people who were 100% sure of her identity.